I have a strict no toes policy. No toes. No toes. That's all I have to say about this book.
What's wrong with your toes, dude?
Nothing's wrong with my toes. I just don't like toes. They freak me out. They're weird.
Never nude feet.
Your own toes freak you
So
out?
if I had lived in this time period, that would have been really hard for me. It just would have.
Welcome to Bonus Features, our podcast where we dive into the crazy and unexpected twists that we did not have time to get into in the sermon on Sunday. When you get into the Bible, the Bible gets into you. And this episode, we're going to really unpack more of that.
No.
Well, I'm Caroline. I'm our host for our podcast today, and I'm joined by Pastor Jason, Pastor Kevin,
hello,
and Abby Patty.
Hi.
Hi. Well, guys, this episode I think is going to look a little bit different from our normal ones because we not only covered one or part of one of the books of the Bible on Sunday. Pastor Jeff went through four. Well,
one.
three, not one.
Even two.
Not two.
Not two.
Not three.
But
You get
four.
more for your money today.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
man.
was a BOGO situation for sure. So or a BOFO? Buy one.
Guess so. I don't really know.
Buy one,
I'm
get
done
four.
with that. Okay, yeah. Buy one, get four.
I'm done with that.
It's good.
Yeah, that joke did not play out, and it's good because it's all recorded. Anyway,
Great attempt though. Good job. Way to bring us in.
Good
Everybody's
try.
just nervous. Everybody's just nervous today.
I'm not nervous. I just want to say I've
I'm
never felt more
uncomfortable
free.
already.
If you have children listening, I apologize in advance.
If you want children, maybe pay attention.
So let's just set this up. We are talking about Song of Solomon on this podcast.
Praise God. We're talking through the Bible.
I'm excited. I'm pretty ready for it. Are you guys ready?
I don't think so.
Listen,
Mentally,
I
emotionally, spiritually,
appreciate
I'm not sure.
being invited to this podcast episode. I've been looking forward to this for a month and a half.
Hey, I
So,
appreciate being invited.
I'm glad everybody else is nervous, but I'm ready to roll.
Excited, ready to do
Got our
this.
loose cannon.
Yeah.
So can we set it up with a couple of things?
I think we should start finishing out First Kings. Because
Okay.
I know you're anxious to get into the
I'm just going to be sitting back drinking my coffee. Y'all talk about First Kings. Y'all ring me in. When,
Gosh.
unmute the mic when it gets to Song of Solomon. All right.
put him on mute for a second.
Yeah.
Well, we started last week. Pastor Jeff opened up First Kings. We went through chapters 1 through, not all the way through 11, but like partially into 11. And that's where we kind of cliffhangered into First Kings part 2. And so we're finishing out the chapter. Pastor Jeff finished it out yesterday, but yeah. So let's finish talking about First Kings before we
can
get
jump
into
in,
that.
and we will just kind of pick up where Pastor left off with King Solomon, wisest man ever. But that can be refuted because he had 700 wives. I don't know if that says you're the wisest man.
The wisest man ever.
Oh, wow.
That's a better attempt than Caroline's joke. Thanks, Abby.
Yeah, yours played out way better than mine did. It's fine.
But where we see him falling into lust with lots and lots of people, and the Bible says foreign people. The reason that's significant is because we see back in Deuteronomy 17:17 that it says kings must not take wives, or his heart will be led astray. And so we see like Solomon's heart had a little Horcrux thing going and just divided up into like several different. You like the Harry Potter reference?
I've been waiting for the Harry Potter references.
I'm going to say I'm very proud to say I had no idea what that meant.
I asked
I have
Pastor
no
Kevin
clue
what Hogwarts house he was a few days ago, and you were like, I don't even know what that means.
That's not even a question.
I thought so too.
Because he didn't know what house.
Yes,
I don't
exactly.
know what I don't know what any of this means.
It just means
So-
you're driven.
Oh, just when we couldn't get any more nerd.
My mind is very much already in Song of Solomon. So
when you said
anything
Horcrux?
that I'm hearing is just through that
So
filter.
we want to
Oh, no.
definitely separate
So-
Harry Potter from Song of Solomon.
Yeah, so let's just wherever y'all go with
One
this,
is
I'm
not.
game.
All right, so
Yes, anyway.
Solomon's heart was divided, needless to say. And just a little side note from like my own personal study, it kind of hit me because the question is, why was David a man after God's own heart? His heart was never really divided. Yeah, he did things that were wrong, but he always found his way back through forgiveness. His heart was never divided. And we see that that's the biggest characteristic from Solomon that he didn't bring from his dad, that his heart was divided, his loyalty was divided. And we see that kind of play out even through what we'll talk about later in the book of Ecclesiastes. So we see him kind of on the downtrend. And Abby, I know you've got some fun things to discuss for chapter 13, and we can probably just go ahead and kind of skip into there. But we do see that Solomon dies, his son takes over as king, but not in the same form in the same way. Pastor Jeff gave us a good, kind of a good setup of Rehoboam. Is that how you say his name?
I would say
I'm terrible.
Rehoboam.
Break it down for me, Abby.
I don't have the pocket pronunciation guide to
Marital?
Bible verses. What?
Oh yeah.
So just to continue the recap, the name with the letter R.
Yes.
He got two forms of wisdom. We heard in the message he got wisdom from the elders and he got wisdom from the young people. I don't think in this particular story it's not saying elder wisdom is always better, young wisdom is always worse. It's just that particular case. He had established leaders that gave him good counsel and people that weren't really talked about as leaders when they were referenced. And he took the folly counsel, the wrong counsel, decided to be a harder leader than Solomon was through taxation and just being harder on the Labor Party. And we see, I'm going to wrestle with this name too, Jeroboam come onto the scene.
Look at you.
Killed that.
Rehoboam and
Nice.
Jeroboam.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, 1 out of 10 is not bad.
1 out of 10.
So if you want to catch us
Yeah,
up, where do we
absolutely.
see them in 13? Solomon's dead.
Yep.
Jeroboam has come back from isolation in Egypt.
Yep.
And where do we pick up, Abby?
So, I mean, first, can we just talk about all the names that are similar in these like next 4 chapters? It's wild. I was very confused the whole time. But I think it's really interesting because you set me up well for this, because we see that Jeroboam at this point has built several shrines. And so here's where we pick up is we have a prophet that comes to him. And this I find really interesting. So he says, by the word of the Lord, he cried out against the altar. Altar, altar, this is what the Lord says. And then he continues on with this prophecy. And something that I read pointed out that he spoke to the altar because he knew the altar was more likely to listen than the king. And so I was very intrigued by the idea.
Case, he was pretty right.
Exactly. And so I was very intrigued by this idea of, as a king that the Lord appointed, because Jeroboam was the king that the Lord had risen up, he had hardened his heart to the word of the Lord, so much so that a prophet was sent not to speak to him, but to the altar. And so I have to ask myself, like, what is it that brought him to that point where his heart was so hardened? And what in my life am I doing that's putting me in that position as well? So then he continues on with the prophecy. And then from there, King Jeroboam hears the prophecy, stretches out his hand against the prophet, and then his hand shrivels up and he can't take his hand back. And it's really interesting because the Lord is making a spectacle out of the hardness of his heart here by shriveling up his hand.
He was just trying to kill this guy. He gave him a prophecy he didn't like.
Yes.
And he was like, get him, kill him, grab him.
Yeah, kill him, grab him. And then he shrivels up his hand. It's wild. It's so interesting.
That's strong.
Yeah. And then from there, he asked the prophet, he asked the man of the Lord to intercede on his behalf and heal his hand. And so it's interesting because whenever I first read it, I was like, wait, did he repent? And his repentance is what healed him, because the prophet does intercede for him. He does pray for him, and then he is healed. But really what it is that he had the prophet that interceded for him and interceded on his behalf. And I thought that was interesting because it kind of mirrors what happens with the Holy Spirit in our lives. And that little bit of foreshadowing there of like the function of the Trinity under the New Covenant was really interesting to me.
Yeah, and why it makes it so important when we see Jesus in the New Testament, because every time he healed, he would forgive people of sin first.
Yes.
And then heal.
Yeah. So that was really interesting to me, but that his heart is still hardened and he still hasn't fully repented. And we see that play out later on in the chapter. And then this is where things get really interesting to me. So he says, thank you, Caroline, for that support. So the king is like, I want to give you a gift for this. I want you to come and eat with me. And the prophet hears from the Lord, do not go and eat bread with him or drink water, and you must return by the way you came. So he took another road and did not return by the way that he came. So there's another old prophet. So we get another person, another character in on this story.
And this guy is known as the
old prophet. I love that so much.
Still no name. He's
Still
just
no
the
name.
old guy.
We have no names here, which makes this a little bit more confusing. I really, whoever wrote this, Solomon, I just want to talk. I just want to know. Why did you record it this way? Because I was confused thoroughly throughout the majority of
I
this.
think he just couldn't spell it. He was like,
Maybe.
the old.
No,
couldn't
I'm just not
remember
going
it.
to attempt that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so just
Is that why all the names are so similar?
And so just for a point of clarity, we can get into that later.
Yeah.
I feel just for a point of clarity, we can recognize the prophet that spoke out to Jeroboam. We can just know him as the prophet from Judah.
Okay.
He was a voice of the Lord
Cool.
from Judah. Judah was the kingdom that still kind of stayed closer to the Lord than Israel. Israel had no godly leaders after Solomon.
Interesting. Because wouldn't that mean that he came from his enemies?
He came from Judah. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I love that. That's like another little layer.
Just to keep that in perspective too, remember Jeroboam was appointed by the Lord not just to be a godly king or a great leader to lead Israel into what's the word?
Prosperity.
Prosperity. He was a voice of the Lord to be judgment on Solomon. Now he had the opportunity to be a good godly leader, But we're starting to see that he's not really. He forced God's hand. He ended up having to retreat because Solomon wanted to kill him. And then he comes back and he still has a choice. Like God's given him a choice, even with the prophet from Judah. You can change your ways now.
Yeah. So the old man catches wind through his sons about kind of what happened. So he sends for him, goes and finds him, and he offers him to come and eat. And the prophet says, no, I heard from the Lord, the young prophet from Judah. He heard, I must not go and eat. And then eventually the old prophet says, like, I'm a prophet too. Like, come eat with me. Like, it's fine. The Lord said, bring him back and come and eat with me. And then it says, this is really interesting to me, but he was lying to him. This is verse 18. But the old prophet lied to him. And then from there, it says, so the man of God returned with him and ate and drank in his house. So then we get judgment on the young prophet for disobeying the word of the Lord. And this is where things get even further interesting to me, because it gets a little weird here. So he receives the judgment through the old prophet. So you have defied the word of the Lord and have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. You came back and ate bread and drank water in the place where he told you not to eat or drink. Therefore your body will not be buried in the tomb of your ancestors. So he gets this judgment, right? Next verse. When the man of God had finished eating and drinking, he finished the meal. So he knows he did wrong, and he just continues to do it.
There's nothing else I can do now.
Yeah, he's like, man, I guess my fate is sealed.
Can I have the rest of that bread before I go?
Can I have the remainder of like the water? Yeah. Can I finish my meal here?
It's gonna be a long drive.
My last meal. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So then
can we shout out like the prophet from Judah? Can we just admire him for 1 second before we see him take the turn? Like when this king just threatened to kill him. And you see God do this miraculous thing, and then he's like, "Oh, I wanted you to come, and I want to give you a meal." A king with probably going to give him the really good food, like really cool place to stay, and he turns him down, like flat. In that kind of culture, that kind of setting, my man's got guts.
That's a big deal.
Yeah,
definitely.
I would have been like, I would have given him a second thought, or at least a lot more gracious answer to refuse. You know what? It's a long trip. I've got to get going now.
Yep. Yes.
So can I
That's
have your
like
leave
that Southern
to go?
hospitality.
Yeah, and he never did that. He was like, nope, can't do it. I got to go.
Yeah, I can't do it. So he finishes his meal, and he gets sent on his way by the old prophet, and a lion encounters him on the road and kills him. But what's interesting is that his body is left intact by the lion, and the lion just kind of sits there, and he hangs out, and he doesn't eat the donkey. He doesn't continue to defile the body any further. Like, he just leaves it.
Am I the only one who thought Lion King or King? What was it? What was the Netflix show? I just saw what's his name in my head.
It's just another Harry Potter reference.
What's the show from Netflix? I didn't watch it.
With a lion?
Huh? With a lion?
I like that.
I
did not watch it.
I didn't watch it. I know a whole bunch of other. If you're listening, no offense. What was the show on Netflix about the lion guy that's in jail? I know some of you guys.
Oh, Tiger King.
Are you talking about Tiger King?
Yeah, Tigers.
Tiger King.
Lions and tigers. I'm from Columbus County. They're all the same.
I was like, is this the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
When I said it, I was like, wait, that's the Disney movie,
Tiger
The
King.
Lion King.
Yeah. Was Aslan in Tiger King?
I'm so sorry.
Was he
you
in-
were talking
was he in
about
Tiger
Yeah, the Tiger King.
Carol
Sorry.
Baskin.
I saw
Okay.
he's the guy I saw in my head sitting beside the dead prophet instead of a lion.
Wait, you didn't watch Tiger King?
No, I didn't watch Tiger King. It's not good for you.
Wait.
Well,
Okay, if you want to be entertained, oh
Yeah.
my golly. I'm not saying it's good entertainment, but it's entertainment.
it's
so.
something. It's
All
something.
I heard is like it's the one show that got worse every time. Every
You're like,
episode
how
got
does-
worse,
yeah.
but it increased in audience every time.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's like is there a story? Like, what storyline are they building here? I don't know. I was
it's a
confused
show
on
that I definitely walked away dumber having
for
watched,
sure.
But
entertained.
I passed some time. Yeah, it was early COVID, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to say?
That's great. I honestly think that's why. It's one of those early COVID
Agreed.
events.
Sorry to derail
Anyway.
that. With
Well,
my
talking about a
Tiger
lion
King.
sitting by the I'm just saying, I have seen a lion eating a carcass in Africa, and they don't just like leave it chill. You know what I'm
No,
saying?
they
Like
don't.
they're trying to like nam on some body right now. So
yeah, so that's important. Remember that. Remember that the body was left.
That's
Untouched.
chilling. He's just chilling by the body.
He's just straight chilling.
Chilling like a lion.
So
or a tiger.
like a liger.
Like a Tiger King.
So
or a Lion King.
Ooh, yeah. Look at that. Speaking of Tiger King, when are we getting to Song of Solomon?
well, if
we
you
just-
guys would let me finish my story.
Can we just... I'm kidding.
No,
This is
it's
awesome.
awesome. We're doing great. We're going to get there. So anyway, all of this to say, the old prophet catches wind of his body, and then he goes and retrieves it, takes care of the remains in the way that it was prophesied that they would be taken care of. And then whenever he died, he requested to be buried with him. And so after all of this, and then it wraps up basically in verse 33. After all of this, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places from all sorts of people. Anyone who wanted to become a priest, he consecrated for the high places. And this was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to its downfall and to its destruction from the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we wrap up with the sin of Jeroboam. So
yeah, well, and I feel like there's a lot in that story that is, there's just a lot of things not told.
Yes.
Like we're not told, like, well, the old prophet that lied to the prophet from Judah, like, why did he lie to him? Like, was he for Jeroboam or was he against Jeroboam? Maybe he was looking at him and he was like, well, you know, that's your conviction. I don't see the validity in it, so it's no big deal. Just come to my house and eat. Or because he died the way he did, is that what spoke to the old prophet? And like, oh, you know what? The word of the Lord to that guy was true. Yeah. And I just caused him, so I am going to honor him and I'm going to be buried with him. So we don't know. There's a lot not spoken. And so I feel like anytime, Pastor Kevin, you may even want to speak to this, but anytime in the word where there's a lot not spoken, it feels like there's something black and white that God really wants us to get from this story.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I take away from this story, I mean, and I kind of look at chapter 13 at the bookend, so the beginning and the end. The ending is Jeroboam didn't change his ways. Like, and as you guys said, his kingdom was wiped off the face of the earth. But I go back to the beginning, and to me, what's the narrative is that when he speaks to the prophet about healing his hand, he says, intercede with your God. To me, the thing that set King David apart, the thing that every king is held up to, is that his heart was tender towards the Lord. Like, he was the king that was focused on that. And for every king after him, Jeroboam falls into this, is that when your heart is not inclined towards God, your actions aren't either. You know, so many times we focus on like, oh my goodness, I can't believe all of this is happening. Well, look at the beginning. I mean, the beginning goes off the rails, right? Like, there was no intimacy, there was no connection with the Lord. And Abby, you mentioned like trying to look through the lens of your own life. That's where I try to look through the lens of mine. It's like, I'm so often like dialed in on the situations and what's happening, and I can't believe this is working out the way that it is. And I really have to go back to the place of my heart. Like, what am I focused on? What is my heart inclined towards? And it tends to make things, I would think that if his heart were inclined towards the Lord, he wouldn't have taken all those signs for him to straighten up. Right. And so to me, that's kind of where I tend to go with a lot of these, is just what's their posture towards God. Yeah.
Well, and even I feel like the whole purpose of the Binge the Bible series is to spend time in God's word and learn how to discern his voice louder than the people, you know, or anything else of the world. And I think this is a good example of that, of even the old prophet, you know, appealing to kind of, you know, all the way back to the garden. Like, it's appealing, he's appealing to his sense of godliness, of like, oh, well, I'm a prophet too. Like, this is what an angel of the Lord has told me, but he's lying. I mean, I think that's just a good word for me and maybe for all of us, that like, we just need to be able to discern the word of the Lord above anything else. And really the way to do that is to spend time with him and his word. Because, you know, you can't trust anybody's voice more than you can trust the Lord's voice. So
it's great.
I think, I mean, even with that, to me, the theme of these chapters is careful who you listen to. Yeah. And I think it's really easy for us to put ourselves in the space of the man from Judah, the prophet from Judah. But I would even push, it's really easy to become the old prophet and say, I'm a man of the Lord. Like, I'm a woman of the Lord. I can trust my own voice. And then it's really interesting who we see the punishment placed upon is not the person lying. Exactly, but it was the one who was deceived. And there's been several commenters that have pointed out that by the Lord communicating the punishment through the old prophet, that was him reprimanding the old prophet. And so to me, I just think to myself, I need to be careful. Am I listening to me or am I listening to the Lord?
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that is good. And I love that. I mean, initially the prophet from Judah had a lot of resolve, you know, into where, like, what God had called him and the instructions he'd given, but now he's got this other voice that he just kind of falls into. And so it's just kind of crazy how we see chain of events unfold because we just don't go to God first.
Yeah.
Feels like a theme, a recurring theme here.
Yeah, it's funny how those things kind of pop back up through the Old Testament, isn't it?
It's true.
Well, and so then we see Jeroboam did not change his evil ways. Abby, you just said that. But then we get into what is it? The prophecy against Jeroboam, and this has to do with his wife. And I thought there was like kind of a funny verse. Abby, I know you had some notes on this, but there was a funny verse. Let's see. You've done evil with all who live before you. You've made yourself to other gods. I think that's skipping ahead. Let's see. It points to the fact that Jeroboam had a wife. In fact, one of the commentaries I read said that a lot of guys will say that they have a wife that they don't get along with really well, but a wife that they can't live without. And they said that this was Jeroboam's relationship with his wife.
Interesting.
So it was something that he wanted to straighten up. And it's oddly enough, it's also the relationship he had with this particular prophet. Ahijah, is that how we said we were going to say his name? Ahijah?
That works.
Ahijah?
Ahijah.
Ahijah.
Feels like a weird accent. Yeah. That's incredible.
So
Ahijah is what I would say,
Yeah.
but I don't know if
We're
that's
taking Near Eastern and make it Far Eastern.
super German sounding.
Oh my god.
Well,
Yeah.
so
My favorite name in this whole chapter is Shishak, I think is how you say that. The king of Egypt.
wait, I thought that
just
was,
like
was
to say
in my
that.
backyard. Just kidding.
I was just like
Like a she shed.
Shishak.
Yes.
A she shed
That
burned down.
commercial. Oh my golly.
I just love that name.
Yeah. Well, even with this whole prophecy, which I think is really interesting. So basically, his son is ill, right? He goes and pursues a prophet. And the prophecy to the wife, because he sends his wife, is
And
when you go home.
Yeah, and
your
the
son will
note
die.
that he trusted him enough to go to the prophet, but
Right.
he didn't trust him enough to like let him know who was coming,
Right.
and what they really wanted.
Yeah, that's wild. So the prophecy is whenever she arrives, she'll like pretend to be someone else, right? And then it says, because of this, I'm going to bring disaster on the house of Jeroboam. I will cut off from Jeroboam every last male in Israel, slave or free. And then it goes on to say, as for you, go back home. When you set foot in your city, the boy will die. So she's told whenever she goes home that her son will die. And she returns home.
Yeah, you know what I'm not ever going to do? Go home.
Go home. And it
Feels pretty
says,
simple.
then Jeroboam's, this is going to be jumping down into 17. Then Jeroboam's wife got up and left and went over to the city that I cannot pronounce. As soon as she stepped over the threshold of the house, the boy died. She went home.
You know that boy is like, Mom, really?
Mom.
Why you do me like that?
Well, not anymore. Wow. He's not with us.
Wow.
Because she went home.
Wow.
I don't understand that. That's talk about some mothers like love and intuition.
Yeah.
That's wild to me.
She's like, but my bed's so comfortable. I just, that's where all my clothes are.
Home.
Yeah.
And I do agree with Caroline. If it's a hard name, you still have to.
You just got to power through it.
I just have to power through it.
I've tried, and I'm probably the
Terza?
worst at pronouncing these
Terza.
names.
Terza.
Terza's it.
That's not even that
Terza.
hard.
You got it. Good job.
Terza. I
Terza's
should have
it.
doubted myself, man.
Yeah. Shishak. All right. No context, just Shishak.
That's it.
And
That's
Abednego.
Well,
In the
so
Abednego.
kind of coming out of that, we can, Pastor Kevin, we're getting closer. Song
We
of
are.
Solomon. We're
Listen,
getting closer.
I'm
I know
ready.
we got a lot
Just
of first
tag
things
me
to-
in.
Let's
Tag
power
me in.
through the rest of it.
Yeah, we got like
So
a what?
so really, like the biggest thing about one thing, just to take note here, and it's kind of like the biggest deal for the rest of Kings. And Pastor Jeff will touch on this in his next Sunday message, if you want to check that out, being by this listening. But the biggest thing to note from here through 2 Kings 17-ish, this is where you see like the historians synchronizing the history of Israel, which is the northern kingdom, and Judah, which is the southern kingdom. And so this is where they start aligning everything. A lot of these stories, you'll see some of these same people, same characters in Chronicles, and it'll just kind of go from there. But the point that we're seeing now is like all these stories, they're starting to align. One of the questions I know we'll get, if we haven't gotten it already, is how do we know this history? How was it put together and all this stuff? The biggest note to take is that there were scribes for every kingdom. So right now we're dealing with 2 kingdoms, Israel, Judah. The other kingdom that is going to come in and be kind of like the variable will be the kingdoms where they end up being exiled to. And because history, culture, what we'll see, even Proverbs, air quotes, because these things are so popular in this culture, we'll see that a lot of the kings will still give access to nobility and popular teachers of the time. They'll still give access to the history of the culture that they're having to be exiled from. And so that's where we see a lot of this being compiled, and the reason it's mentioned in several different books. So just a little background on that, and this is just to give like an accurate account of what's happening.
It's good. Another thing that happens is in chapter 17, Elijah shows up. Not to jump ahead if I'm jumping ahead of anybody.
No, you're good.
But when you talk about the old prophet and the dishonest prophet, one of the things that you can read in Jewish history is one of the reasons Elijah is so prominent and then Elisha after him is because there had been such, just like there were kings that were crooked, there were prophets that were crooked, and that led people down various paths. And so when Elijah shows up on the scene, and even the prophets that are documented in the Bible after him, it's a big deal. Like, he matters because he is much like a king who was chasing after God and honest and with integrity. He was a prophet on the same path. And so it's one of the things usually when we think in the Bible prophet, we immediately go to holy and perfect and following God. But even the story, Abby, you kind of highlighted, is shining a light on the fact that wasn't the case.
Yes.
And so when Elijah shows up, he quickly becomes one of the most powerful, and in their history still, one of the most popular.
Yeah.
And so I love the story where he shows up. I think immediately his story, and then especially Elisha later on, they're just chock full of like things you preach sermons around, right? It's just really good.
So good story. Well, and it's cool that you brought that up, because one of the things I read, Hebrew tradition, I wish I could remember the scripture reference, because it's like a shout or a throw to all the false prophets that start to pop up. In Hebrew tradition, they believe that this could have been one of the first false prophets, the old prophets from chapter 13.
There's
cool.
mention of them in 2 Kings. I saw that in my research, and I can put it in the show notes.
That'd be awesome.
But yeah, there is reference to them in 2 Kings. It's interesting for sure.
All
Are
right,
we wrapping up?
Are we ready to
I think we're wrapping
transition?
up. Yeah.
Are we
So
transitioning?
I think I don't think that we said this before, but I think it is important to note. We're going to talk about, like we said, Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, and Song of Solomon. Yes. But it's not because they're next in line. It's because they are all, as we're calling, what do we decide to call them? Better Call Saul writings?
Better Call Saul. Yes.
So,
Words of wisdom with Solomon.
Words of wisdom with Solomon.
Yeah.
Old Saul.
Good old Saul.
So if we say Saul from here on out, everybody will know who we're talking
It's
about.
S-O-L, not S-A-U-L.
Oh, but if you don't listen to his words of wisdom, you
You
are
are SOL.
SOL.
What does that stand for?
Yeah.
My kids are probably listening.
What? I don't know.
Can't wait
I didn't
for,
watch
the
that.
parents to
Oh,
have
yeah, I
to
didn't
answer
know.
I didn't
that.
watch that Lion show on Netflix. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, Lion King. I didn't
Lion
see that one.
King. Yeah, Lion King got a lot of ratings.
So yeah.
But yeah,
Better
so I
Call
just thought that
Saul.
was important to note, because it might be confusing that like we're going
Yes.
First Kings and then all these other books that are not
Absolutely.
Second Kings and then back to
Yeah.
Second Kings. And my type A brain is like, well, no, First Kings and then Second.
Make it
Kings.
make sense, Caroline.
I can't.
Make it make sense.
All right, so Ecclesiastes. So yeah, Abby, I know that you had some themes and some stuff that you had kind of picked out of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can I give a little bit of history
for it.
just
Oh,
before
yeah.
we get in there?
Absolutely.
So one of the things you'll see with Ecclesiastes and what makes it so cool is, I mean, it's kind of like Saul's swan song. And if you do watch Better Call Saul last season, it's his swan song too, so don't get confused. I probably just confused you by even saying all that. But this is Solomon's swan song. He's an old man. But even in 1:1, there's an indication that this is a person, whoever, I mean, we attribute the author being Solomon, but whoever it is, there's a call to an assembly. So he's saying, everybody come listen. So we see this specifically for the people of Israel, but we see the tone really to anybody that will listen, anybody that will listen to wisdom. And I also think it's funny that in 1:1, there's a Hebrew word, it's koheleth, and it means
Powered through our
preacher.
crowd.
So koheleth Kevin, instead of preacher Kevin.
Oh, I like that.
koheleth Kevin.
Koheleth,
love
please.
But he described
Geheleth?
himself as a preacher, and he described himself as a son of David. And so
Okay.
that's why we can really confidently say that these were Solomon's thoughts.
Interesting.
Because of all these things. This is also like one of the words that we actually talked about this early in Binge the Bible, but through the Tanakh. So we see the K part of the Tanakh is Ketuvim, and those are called the writings. And so this is where we see like the books of wisdom, Proverbs,
good.
even
It's
Psalms,
good.
Job, all
Yeah.
these, Song of
love it.
Solomon.
It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, major themes. We have earthly goals, money, fame, power, accomplishment, and human wisdom will not bring us happiness. Only a life that is totally submissive and devoted to God will bring happiness. And I think you see that. I mean, even as the way it's separated, wisdom is meaningless. Pleasure is meaningless. Wisdom and folly, we see wisdom again, are meaningless. Work is meaningless. To me, this reads like hanging out in a nursing home. with like all the old crotchety grandpas
Oh
that
my
are just
goodness.
like
Back
over
in my
life and like imparting their wisdom, but also it's just really existential. You know what I mean? Like they just know they're nearing the
I called
end.
So-
Ecclesiastes 3 the funeral chapter
The funeral chapter.
because that's the like there's a time time for
I
everything.
saw that and I was like, wait, was there a
Time
funeral
to
in
be
here?
born and a time
gotta
to
read this
die.
again.
Time
That
to
is-
So
plant,
I took
time
in
to
college.
uproot.
I took a wisdom literature class, which these are in it. And
We had very
our
different
professor,
college experiences.
Yeah. Our professor,
I
he
made
talked
art.
about how each book in the wisdom lit they have different voices. So Proverbs is like the voice of this brilliant young professor, and he almost would say that's what Solomon's posture was at the time, and it even reads that way, And then Ecclesiastes, if I remember right, he said it was like a middle-aged, cynical professor.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
That's
he
real good.
literally
That's
compared
real.
it to that. And then Psalms he had a different. And but it was really awesome the way that he would just kind of like unpack that, and it reads that way.
It does.
Because it reads like there's kind of the march of time. There's we're all going to die. There's that section.
Yes.
And then there's just kind of life's random nature. And really in Proverbs, if you read it, not to jump ahead of that, but basically Proverbs is this young brilliant professor saying life isn't random at all. If you do this, you get this.
Sure.
And here's how you can have the best life.
Yeah.
Here's how you can have success in life. And Ecclesiastes is saying, no, that's actually not true at all. And when you think about the way that we approach life sometimes, Pastor Jason, you and I have been around the sun a few times.
Thank you for not including me
You
in
do,
that.
yeah, you're not included. But
What do you mean I'm not included in that?
yeah,
Out of my
not
wrinkles.
yet.
He's
We're
talking about the
excited not
wrinkles.
to be.
We
Right,
have
right.
more wrinkles around.
We're excited
But
to not be included.
you do tend to kind of
We're young.
look sometimes at life and go, yeah, there's a little more cynicism that kind of creeps in. And so when your heart drifts from staying tender towards the things of the Lord, like we see Solomon's did, that's what creeps in.
Yeah.
Criticism creeps in, like cynicism creeps in, a lack of perspective creeps in. And so while there's still wisdom in there, it's just interesting to hear it through that lens.
Yeah.
It's true, it's not wrong,
Yeah.
but it's just
Right.
the tone with which it's it comes out.
Well, and it makes this book a really difficult book to interpret and to teach from, because some of this stuff in here you can't teach us. Oh, he's telling us this is what we should do, this is what you should believe. Some of this is he's giving you his current perspective,
Right.
and where he is,
Right, yeah. That's
personally.
interesting.
And it's almost like a warning, and we see even in the conclusion of the end of the chapter, like they're kind of bringing it around to the big point, and it's not to follow just all of this earthly wisdom that he's found. He's just kind of giving you a snapshot of where his mind was.
He wanted to turn the world upside down. That's essentially what it
Well, I
boils
got
down
a lot
to.
of encouragement. Chapter 3, verse 18 and 19.
The funeral chapter?
Yeah.
Encouraging?
You got encouragement from that, huh?
Well, just wait. I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like the animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless.
Encouraging,
stop.
encouraging
that's it?
words with Caroline.
That's our new segment. Caroline's encouraging words.
Caroline, can I join you in this?
Please do.
My favorite was chapter 7, verse 3. Frustration is better than laughter because a sad face is good for the heart. I want that on a cross
I was
pillow.
about
I
to
was gonna
say,
you need to phrase that
That
like you
is
told us.
In-
I would hang
fantastic.
that in my house so
That's-
fast.
I want to hang
Because
that
you know
in
those
my
people
home.
that have the like Proverbs
Yes.
3:5,
Like the
trust
Hobby
in
Lobby
the
art.
Lord.
Yes,
and
you don't
I-
find that verse at Hobby Lobby.
you
It's
don't,
right
but
under
you
the
should.
it's right under the pumpkin that says blessed. Right? Is that one. We're getting a pumpkin with that verse on it this year.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Everything is meaningless.
because
Ecclesiastes
a sad
3:19.
face is good for the heart.
Yeah.
A sad face is good for the heart.
I think
That's awesome.
we have a good drop on a new merch line. I'm just saying.
Is that wait? Can I do an upside down, like a smiley face, or
Yeah.
like an upside down smiley face, or even just like a frowny face?
Everything is
and that's like
meaningless.
what the face is. Is that?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about it for Song of Solomon because my mind's been there.
Oh, okay.
But the hashtag that's in the Bible, and I think we need a merch line hashtag that's in the Bible. And it could be that verse.
Yes.
Listen, I'm just saying,
Yes.
we've got a whole new
I've been on a
business started
sticker,
here.
a water bottle sticker kick these
Yeah.
days. I've been trying
Cynical
to
stickers.
cynical stickers. That's your Etsy shop. We'll drop the link to this
Like your
the thing in
Redbubble
the show
shop?
notes whenever we have an Etsy shop off and running.
Incredible. That's
I think
Too
this is
optimistic
great.
for this group.
I love it.
We
so
just
good.
hashtag it's in the Bible.
yeah.
Hashtag
it's in the Bible. Yeah.
See, it works.
Yes. Words of wisdom. Better call Saul.
Yep.
Frustration is better
Or
than
will
laughter.
be SOL. Which Jason still hasn't told us what that means, but
He hasn't. We're waiting anxiously.
You have
Anyway.
to watch Tiger King to find out.
I don't watch that filth. All right. So anything else on Ecclesiastes before we move on?
think we're
Did anybody
moving.
else have like a favorite thing to
I'm-
share?
I
mean,
just discovered
sure
a
mine
new
was
one
clear.
in
Yeah.
what Abby read.
Ecclesiastes
I've
7:3.
read
That's my
it a
new life
lot.
verse.
I've read it a lot, but I don't know if I've ever just highlighted that verse. Abby has that verse highlighted in her Bible. I think that's a win for the day.
It's my new life verse, guys.
If
Words
any,
to live
yeah,
by.
you please let that be your life verse.
It is.
Like
When
that's
people ask
amazing.
me Ecclesiastes 7:3, go look it
That's
up.
a great one. If you're a high school student looking for a yearbook quote,
Wait,
that's your
great.
yearbook quote.
So I always,
man.
I'm just my nature. I'm always going to bring it back to like, what have I learned from this, and how can I spin this into a positive light?
yeah,
because
me
I got to
too.
tell you guys, like, did anybody binge the book of Ecclesiastes? Did you just read it straight out?
I opened it, and the Lord gave me Ecclesiastes 7:3.
Man, I love reading the Bible. I did not end my binge session encouraged with Ecclesiastes.
Yeah.
It was
reminded.
just depressing.
Yeah, to me, I'm reminded of something I think you said earlier, Pastor Jason, that it's the perspective. Like when you look at the end of Solomon's life and you look at what he produced in the end of his life, this is it.
Yeah.
So when our lives, and honestly, consistency matters. You know, when we're consistently focused on the Lord, it's not great to just burn white hot early on and then let it just fizzle out at the end. Like there is something to, in a mature way, like keeping our heart focused on the Lord and tender towards the Lord.
Yeah.
And what that does is it allows people, I mean, we've all been around people that in the latter years of their life, not the best hang, right?
The best thing.
Are we like?
That's fair.
And then we've all been around people. I was actually around a group of them at one of our events for our Pine Valley campus this past week. I sat in like the senior section of the room. It was awesome. It was awesome. I was taking selfies and it was great. And but
They're the
they
most fun,
all
though.
had they're the
Yeah.
most fun, and
They're
they had
great.
the best like disposition on life. And they were happy and laughing and getting in a little bit of trouble. You know, it was just all of that. But honestly, I think it's because they have kept their heart just tender towards the things of the Lord. And so because of that, their heart has not gotten hardened towards the things of just life.
Yeah.
And so when I read this, that's what I read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His life's just been hardened
Well,
towards life.
and I'm kind of in the same point because when I actually the thing that saves it for me is chapter 12, and so when I got back, I had to go back and reread chapter 12 just from like
You need a palate cleanse.
I did I had to go back and just kind of get some kind of resolve because I did hear this old guy in my ear just telling me, well, you know, don't it doesn't matter what happens, everything's meaningless, we're all going to die. But it also makes me think of the older guy. It really, I kind of put the voice similar to my granddad. We were super close, but he was such a great voice in my life. He was like one of my best friends, my best man at my wedding. But he tended to be kind of like a negative guy. And that's the voice I kind of hear. And it's like, don't make the mistakes I did. He's bitter because he didn't take his own advice when he could have.
Yeah.
And I even think back to like when I was trying to get grounded in my faith for myself, I was like, well, why is the Bible true? Why are we privy to the truth and the rest of the world's not? And I was like, well, you know what? The only way for me to find out is to go out and experience it. I'm going to go and some kind of like an empirical exploration. And I tried that for a few times, and I was like, this is the dumbest thing I have ever done. I'm not learning anything. I'm just doing this to myself. And that was when it hit me. These are the voices that I should listen to. Like, they've been there. They've tried so many things. Don't make the same mistakes. And chapter 12 kind of resolves it. It starts out in verse 1. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the days of trouble come. And he goes on to list all these terrible things. All these terrible things that trouble looks like. But then at the end, the conclusion says, in verse 13, it says, now all this has been heard. In this conclusion of the matter, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good and evil. So those hard times, the dark times are going to come, but you have to position and get your heart positioned to encounter the dark times. Like the same, Pastor Kevin, the same thing you were saying. Right. In fact, I even put a note in my Bible just so I could remember God when you get to this point, the dark days. It's good. Guard, train your heart to be ready for the dark days.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
That's a common theme with this episode. Like, who are you listening to? Listen to the Lord. It's good. Yeah.
And now, a quick break for today's unofficial sponsor, Connect. Connect is all about helping you grow in your relationship with God and connecting you to the community of faith here at Lifepoint. Whether you're new to church or you've been a Christian for years, we can all take the next step in our faith. The best place to get started is Connect. a one-week event that will help you learn about Lifepoint Church and how you can get involved. To register for Connect, visit lifepointnow.com/connect class. That's lifepointnow.com/connect class. Now, we'll get back to the episode.
Well, is it time?
I don't know.
And we flip the page.
We flip the page, and the narrative
all of a
drastically
sudden-
changes.
Boys to Men start singing.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to welcome the smooth, sultry voice
Listen,
Make a
of our
wish.
guest DJ.
oh my golly, I love this because
I'm already uncomfortable.
my Bible color codes things, and Song of Solomon is literally all green.
What does green mean?
Just, I'm gonna give you
It's
one
the color
guess.
of passion, isn't it?
It's the color of love. It's
So-
all.
Oh, there's some
Pastor
gray.
Kevin, you got
There's a
in
little
my
bit of gray
Bible-
and
Boys to
yellow.
Men.
So in my
Right.
Bible, Melissa highlighted mine, and it's all red because it's red hot. Song of Solomon is red hot.
You are going to be in so much
I'm
trouble.
so
Tell
ready
your
for
kids
this.
to not listen to this episode, please.
Now
Yeah,
I'm really
so,
thinking Boys to Men.
I don't mind. I think the girls can listen in. The girls can listen in. They've got to have something to talk about in therapy, I guess. I don't know. But this is exciting.
Turn it off.
So
Save
a few
yourself.
things. Can I kind of set the stage for this?
You absolutely
Please
do.
do.
Take it away.
So one, we like to have fun on this podcast. So one, throughout the next section, we should have done this from the beginning because I've already had a
that's
few
true.
that have I've been quiet on, but there's an unintentional, inappropriate word count because you can't read through this without thinking like you're a middle schooler. So we're gonna have that. All right.
Whatever
so
is
gonna pop up on the
pure,
bottom of
whatever
the
is
screen.
lovely,
what?
lovely,
No.
whatever is noble.
Think on those things, but you can't unhear other things. So
Hashtag that's in the Bible.
hashtag
Agree.
that's in the Bible. All right. And then the other, I know that y'all have done the last few weeks. I've not been on here. Y'all have done songs. Kind of Pastor Jeff has driven
That
this,
is
right?
true,
He
yes.
always brings it up.
So let's go ahead and set what is a theme song for this. I threw Boys to Men out.
That's all I can hear in my head now. I'm singing it in my head right now.
Pretty
'Cause
good.
I love some One Yay.
I mean,
Come
you
on.
guys were talking about Madonna.
One Yay.
One Yay.
Yay.
Well, he's the lead singer of Boys to Men.
He is, yeah.
Well,
I'm
and
gonna be
Sean.
real with you
Given
guys.
And
me
Sean.
$1 million and asked who the lead singer or any singer in Boys to Men was, I would not have been able to.
I'm gonna
One
be.
One
Yay,
Yay,
Sean.
I can't remember the other
The
two.
bass singer. I don't know
He
his.
doesn't-
bass
He doesn't really perform with them anymore.
And then the other guy.
Do they still
Nothing.
perform?
So-
They're still
Oh, yeah.
alive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, they're
Dude,
still
these
alive?
guys, they are still awesome.
What's
They are
wrong?
still phenomenal.
So on behalf of every child of the late 80s and 90s that are listening to this,
That was me.
what?
I was
They're
born
still
in the late 80s.
alive?
Can I just really quickly make this worse for you guys? I cannot name a single Boys to Men song I have listened to.
So here's the thing: if you heard it, you would
think I would-
immediately
I
you would
would know
immediately go, "Oh, I've heard that. Like that's a soundtrack of something."
Okay.
And so I think it could be a soundtrack of Song of Solomon. I'm just kind of throwing that out there. I also some submissions would be probably a couple of
Madonna.
Celine Dion songs, for all of you other guys, and then
So good. So many good
I think
songs.
Madonna. Yeah,
Yes.
I think Madonna's a good one.
Yes.
Which one?
Like a version.
Yeah. okay.
Right? Like-
just making sure that's what you're.
I mean, I can sing that.
Yeah.
It's if you want
not,
me to.
not a
Can
lot.
we do that?
No.
No? Okay. I was just gonna say.
I think it's
We can
probably
hum
okay.
it.
I sang that all the time as a kid in the 80s, and then when I got older, I was like, oh. Can't really sing that around mom and dad.
Oh my golly.
It is the theme song for the Tiger King show. Just so you know, if you
Yeah.
want to watch that.
So we have our theme song.
Yes. So anyway, so I'm excited about this. So I'll jump in. So one of our takeaways. So I'm going to start with this, and this is unfair. So probably 8-10 years ago, I preached the majority of a sermon series we did just on Song of Solomon, and it was a lot of fun. So I was able to find some of the notes, so I'll pull some of that up. But I'm going to start with a story, okay? So this is, Pastor Jeff made a point yesterday, and I tried to write it down. I don't think I wrote it down quick enough. But he said, sex is a gift from God to be saved for marriage. You guys remember that? Yes. So, okay, so I told this story, and I ended a sermon with this. And I'm talking, there's 1,000 people in the room. It's awesome. And it's already been, these sermons are a little like, you're on the edge of your seat, right? So I get to the end, and I told the story, and this is all, legit, that when Melissa and I got married, Melissa, I wish that I had lived my younger years like she did. She lived, super focused on the Lord, and she talked about having prayed for me even before she knew me, which it even took me a while to understand that, But she saved herself for marriage. And I kind of, talked through that a little bit and just with a lot of intentionality. And so when we got married, essentially she had saved herself as a gift for me. And so when we got married on our wedding night, she gave me that gift. And I opened that gift. And 30 minutes later, I opened it again. I love it. So, baby, if you're listening to this, I love you. You are wonderful.
Sorry, Melissa. I'm so
And
sorry.
so there's probably a more vast reach of this podcast than there was even during that sermon. But just thought I would open up with that. Is that good?
I appreciate
Is
you
it setting
being
the tone?
so vulnerable.
Setting the
and
tone, right?
sharing that story.
All right, good.
Appreciate's not the word I was going to use, but
I'm
you sure-
I'm loving
you sure
it.
did
I love it.
Oh, man.
Oh.
So are we ready to jump in?
I literally don't. You just take it away because I got nothing to say here. I have no idea where to go from here.
All right, so I'll kind of go like big picture. How does
Please
this sound?
do.
So Song of
Yeah.
Solomon. So really, Pastor Jeff talked about some of it yesterday. He kind of like got into a couple of the chapters. Big picture, if you're reading Song of Solomon, the framework to read it through is it's really focused on a few things. Starts off talking about attraction and pursuing. Talks about a honeymoon. It talks about how this married couple handle conflict, how they last through that conflict. And it really, as you're reading through the chapters, like those are the major themes. And most of them are actually broken up like per chapter. You can look at chapter 1 and it's mainly just about attraction. Pastor Jeff spent some time on that yesterday. A couple of things to me that are really interesting, like when you read through that, he talked about, I think it's verse 2, where it says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the young women love you. And one of the things that he talked about a little bit was reputation and character, that really that's the thing that she found attractive in him. But it's also interesting, like some of the things that have significance. So like the purified oil. So back in those days, they didn't really take that many baths. I mean, it's not the most attractive thing. But it shows the heightened level of the shared attraction, because he's saying that you are like this. You are like someone who's been adorned with fragrance of perfumes. And he's comparing her to something that was not normal at the time. It was the highest level of attraction, the highest level of intimacy, if that makes any sense. And so I love that. I think that's just a cool thing. But it also shows, like for us, when we're looking for the person we're going to spend forever with, that character matters. That the most attractive, the most set apart, the most unique thing is oftentimes not the way somebody looks. It's not all that. It's who they are. Yeah. And we forget that. And we wonder sometimes, like, why the people maybe, thank goodness I'm not in the dating scene anymore, but like I hear people talk about and even get married to people and go like, why can't I just find the right kind of person? And probably it's because you're looking for and looking in the wrong places, right? Mm-hmm. And it's hard to find those things that matter when you're looking in all the areas where those things are never necessary. Yeah. And so anyway, so I love how it starts off just really talking about character, but it goes on, and I don't know if Pastor Jeff talked about this, but I love this point, and it starts in verse 5. And to me, we won't get into all some of the stuff that makes you blush, unless we want to. I can go there. But this is my favorite part. So godly character matters, right? Yeah. But then verse 5, listen to what she says. She says, dark am I, yet lovely. Daughters of Jerusalem, dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. And then verse 6, do not stare at me because I am dark, because I am darkened by the sun. My mother's sons were angry with me and made me take care of the vineyards. She's been working outside. It was kind of a punishment for her. But my own vineyard I had to neglect. Essentially what she's saying is my own well-being was kind of cast aside, right? And what I love about this is essentially she's spent a life outside. She's sunburned. Her skin is super weathered, is what that means. She hadn't taken care of her skin. And what I love about it is when she found the person that she could trust, she slowly started to reveal her insecurities. Mm-hmm. And that what you see is that he loves her anyway. And to me, I think we get into like the sexual content and all of that really matters, but it starts with finding the ability to trust someone with your insecurities. And so I just love all of that, because to me, it just begins with saying, listen, it's not about the physical. Now, as we all know, we get there. But But it's about coming to a place where, listen, this is a person that has the character that I can trust, And so I would just start with saying all of the other stuff of where it goes. It's beautiful, it's brilliant, it's awesome. But when we're looking for that foundation of what it means to have a healthy relationship, a strong marriage, it starts with a godly character, and that is so focused on Him that we can trust Him with whoever and whatever we are. Does that make sense?
Man, that's good.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Yep.
I love that. That's one of my favorite parts of the whole book.
That was so much.
That was a roller coaster
That was
from you,
so
Pastor Kevin.
You like that?
Say.
You like it?
That was so unexpected and just so beautiful. I'm sorry.
We will raise our expectations.
I'm so sorry. I did not mean that. It was an insult.
It's awesome. No, I don't mind.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
I can get to the more expected stuff.
Well,
if y'all
I just
wanna
like
do
that because you brought it up. It's a fruit, if you will, a fruit of the character and the vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing I learned. Because long story short, I did not want to get married. I didn't really like drama. I didn't like being open. I definitely did not like being emotional. So I was like, at the thought of having to be intimate with somebody, I was like, there's no way. There's no way I will ever be in this position with anybody, whether physically vulnerable or emotionally vulnerable. And so to find somebody like my wife, Stacy, that I could be intimate with and to have permission based on her character and the vulnerability was awesome. This was permission for me to be open with her because she was a gift to God just like I was a gift to her.
It's great.
It's good stuff.
I love it.
That's so sweet. Y'all, you guys.
It's good.
Oh, you
Carolyn
did
was
it.
on the edge of her seat the whole time.
I
You
know.
see that?
You started with fruit, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Now, do y'all want to get to the good part?
I mean, I was going to say, because of all that,
Pastor
it leaves
Kevin's like,
me
all right, and anyway, moving on.
I love, because a lot of people would, I had a professor in college who really loved diving into this book, and he liked the illustrations and everything he was talking about, and people would try to argue, that's not what that means. That's not what that means. That, it's the fruit, it doesn't mean this and signify this. Well, when you get to chapter 4 and even on into chapter 7, he starts being pretty straight up with what he's talking about. Chapter 4, verse 11 says, "Your lips drop sweetness as the honeycomb, my bride. Milk and honey are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like a fragrance of Lebanon."
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I feel
This
like
is
I
where
should
the
have
youth pastors.
Light some
I
candles.
should feel like I should have a really deep voice saying this.
Delilah.
This is where the youth pastors get really they're just ready. Man,
They have a lot of time.
they're ready to
unpack
preach.
here.
This is their favorite
Their
book.
series graphic has flowers
The
all over
series
it.
graphic.
Your garden locked up. There's a
Yeah, man. They're ready to talk about their smoking hot
Who
wife
can I offend
every
tonight?
time.
every
That's right.
time.
Listen, it's real.
Our challenge to you as our readers is to count every time a youth pastor says my smoking hot wife. There are a lot.
That's so good.
So I'm going to jump ahead. Let's jump to, and this will be the last verse that I highlight out of here, just because I know you guys don't want to talk about this all day, but we could. So, all right. So this is in chapter 4, verse 5. I think Pastor Jeff read this yesterday, but it's the verse where he is saying your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. And what I love about this, and Pastor Jeff didn't have time to get into all of this, but what I like about it is when you start breaking down the verses in this section, you have to think about, it's not just the practical of what the person looks like. We kind of see it through that way, but a lot of times in Hebrew culture, they would describe something not as it actually was, but as it should be approached. And so the way this is written is less about what her breasts are like and more about how she should be approached. Yeah. And when you think about twin gazelles, how do you approach twin gazelles? Quietly, with gentleness, right? Mm-hmm. Not with harshness, not with loudness. And so the way he's communicating to her is that you are worthwhile for me to approach gentle. And I would say, even for me, when I think about this, that's the opposite of what I'm thinking when I'm reading this verse. It's just not at all like the way that I'm thinking about that. And so, but what it communicates to a husband and wife is the power and the importance of approach. Yeah. That so many times, as men, we kind of approach it like, hey, and I'm okay with this. Like if you need to put it on the calendar so that you're keeping the marriage happy, whatever you need to do. If it's boom chicka boom Thursday, then that's fine. Whatever you need to do, man.
Note to self:
listen,
don't go to the Lloyd house on Thursday.
Yeah, don't come by the house on Thursday nights.
I picked the wrong time to take a sip of my coffee.
Yeah, don't come by the house on Thursday, girls. Don't schedule to be off work on Thursday. So there's just a lot that that's there. But then I think on the opposite side for females, like it's one of those things where I think on that side the approach is make an approach.
Yeah.
Not to just put all of that on the man or to expect that it should just happen. I mean, Pastor Jason, we've been married for a minute, right? Like
Not to each other.
Not each other.
Not to each other.
But we both know, like it's one of those things. Like you have to work. Like you can't just expect it that you don't have to approach. You don't have to try. You don't have to like do everything that you can do to make sure that you're keeping intimacy alive.
Yeah. And when it's not coming from both places, there are too many opportunities for miscommunication.
Exactly.
Oh, she's not thinking about me. She doesn't care. So I'm just not going to say anything either.
Exactly.
It's got to be like a two-way street, especially with all the distractions of life.
Yeah.
And that's what I love. What Pastor Jeff even kind of ended that section from what you're just reading, Pastor Kevin, when I'll skip to the last verse, but it says, "You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. This is your standard of beauty now."
It's good.
And I believe that whenever you honor the Lord, because I told you guys before we started recording about a professor I had in college, and his famous saying in our marriage and family class was, "Sky's the limit in the marriage bed." We were given permission, and it's funny and it's awesome, but there's always it's a good spot to say amen, but it's also a good way to remember that like it does take mutual respect still.
That's good.
Mutual respect, mutual understanding, but mutual approach.
So here would be, this is in my notes from years ago, so I'm just going to read this. And if this needs to end this section, I'm fine with it, okay? But it's,
this out.
I wrote this. So set a date, get a babysitter, have a nice dinner, light some candles, take a bath, give a massage, turn on some Marvin Gaye, and let's get it on.
Yeah. Or Boys to Men.
Yeah!
Or Boys to Men.
Yes, or Boys to Men.
Man.
And let's go.
Can I just say, like, so me and Stacy were talking about this last night. Not in those terms specifically, but just how we talked about it at church. And, we just had I think Pastor Barry said in a meeting this morning that we just had a round of COVID babies. He's from Leland, so there's a lot of babies. Mm-hmm. I feel like as a church, as Lifepoint, in about 9 months, because of yesterday's message, we may see like a new
kids, men, get ready.
Yeah,
my wife was like, we got to start, recruiting now.
Oh my God.
Good.
Amazing. Yeah. I love how me and Caroline both just really quickly.
Stop talking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like you guys have something to offer.
I do too.
Well, okay, so I'm out on most of this, but
I'm out.
Is this all cringe of the Bible for you?
It is indeed. However, in 7:1, whenever he calls her sandaled feet beautiful, no.
You're
#no.
not a feet
Hashtag
person?
no.
She got a pedicure.
I have a strict, I don't care. I have a strict no toes policy. No toes. No toes. That's all I have to say about this book.
In what capacity?
No toes.
I've been told I have really nice feet.
I'm not here for sandals. No.
By who?
I'm not here for I'm not here for sandals. I know I live at the beach. I don't care.
Wait.
I wear sneakers every day of my life. I do.
What do you wear to the beach?
I mean, then I do. But then my toes are buried under the sand. You know what I'm saying?
What's
No
wrong
toes.
with your toes? Dude?
Nothing's wrong with my toes. I just don't like toes. They freak me out. They're
Never
weird.
nude feet.
Your own
Well,
toes
she's
freak
never
you
nude
So
out?
if I had lived in this time period, that would have been really hard for me. It just would have. Sandaled
like,
feet,
what's
no.
with that girl? Why is
I
her
just
feet
don't
wrapped up?
I just don't understand why you're calling someone's feet beautiful.
Well,
I really don't.
I gotta say, I'm not like
I'm not here
a
for it.
foot guy, but that was what was one of the stipulations with whoever I was going to marry. Like they couldn't have janked up feet.
That's fair.
like it.
They had to
And
have
here's a
cute feet.
PSA
I'm a
that I
fan.
think is really important. Men, if you have janky feet,
I was about
get
to
a
say
pedicure.
that. Listen,
It's not girly.
There's nothing
it's
wrong
okay.
with that. There's
if
nothing
your
wrong.
feet are gonna look nasty,
there is nothing wrong.
there's nothing wrong with that.
Listen,
Nasty feet are nasty feet. You just got some.
I
you
would
just
say,
gotta-
and this would be where I would disagree. So like
I don't wear
if I
sandals.
You don't
went,
get nail
if
polish.
Pastor Jason and I went with our wives and got a pedicure, I'm not cool with it, but I'll go if she wants to. But if one of my girls came home and said, "Hey, this guy's really interested in us. Oh, by the way, he gets pedicures." Nope, I'm out.
Do you know how much respect?
That's a no. That's
is
just
so
a hard no.
much better than looking down and being like, "What's with your feet?"
What if
That's
you
a
have
hard no.
fungus toes?
Or like crusty crust? No,
Ew.
You can treat those at home.
No.
no,
No. No. You know how much respect you would gain from all of the women in that salon?
Yeah.
If you walked in there confidently and
I
got
don't
a
live for the
pedicure.
respect of men or women.
I live for the respect of the Lord.
I live for the respect of toes that don't.
This is
stare
what I'm
into
saying.
my
This is
face.
why I have a strict no-toe policy. I don't like other people's toes, and so I do not expose my toes.
I don't want to like touch them or anything, but I
don't want to see them. I don't want to be in a meeting and see your toes.
My toes are always out. My toes are
No.
offended under the table right now.
Well, I can't see your toes, so it's fine.
They can see you.
All right.
All right.
So Proverbs.
Feels like a good time to move on
Amazing.
to the last book that we're going to discuss
Can
today.
we shout out Pastor Jeff right here? Because I know
For
that
bailing on the podcast.
So it was an amazing. Well, so he bailed on today, and I'm just keeping his seat warm. He'll be back. But this was the segment that he really wanted to be a part of.
Oh yeah.
Proverbs.
I was like, it's 50-50. He either really wants to be here, or he was like,
No, I think
I'm gonna see how they handle
Yeah,
it.
this was the one.
I think
he
he
really
would have
wanted.
been down with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
He
Are
would
we
have had some more song suggestions too.
I
I'm
can
a little
almost guarantee-
disappointed in the weak song selections here.
I just can't
Yeah.
get
I
I
off
feel like I'm the only
Boyz
one
II
bringing
Men.
my
I
love
went
song.
Casey
game.
and JoJo,
My
but that I don't know. Like,
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm all about some JT, Justin Timberlake.
Bringing
ooh,
sexy
that
back.
girl. No, That Girl by JT. That song.
Oh, that's
Okay.
the song.
That's a good song. Yeah.
It's a little too current. I feel like we've got to go.
It's not that
back a little
current.
way.
Well, there
Gotta
are
go.
current people
gotta
in
reach-
love.
There's some you got to have a '90s power ballad or something in there too. We don't have that.
That's true.
There's something-
Stacey, one of her weaknesses is 80s power ballads.
Yeah. Just
And not
to
like
be
Michael
the
Bolton
next
power.
to be with you. We could that. Listen, that's a good one.
It's a little too
good.
poppy. I feel like it needs to be a
No,
little more
no.
like, oh yeah.
I don't know, I just work
that
here.
kind of
Like
vibe.
how, wait, what was that?
Oh yeah.
I think that was the Kool-Aid Man, actually. As I did that, I was like, not all the
Oh yeah.
whatever. They're all the
Song of Solomon. Oh yeah. And with that,
That's
the
our
book
quote
of
of the day.
Proverbs.
Okay.
So let's get back to words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pastor,
Right.
Pastor Jason,
Proverbs.
do you want to run through some history of Proverbs? I'm just gonna collect us.
Well, I
Just
mean,
get
so
us
the popular
focused.
thing for Proverbs, I looked up the modern definition for Proverbs is like pithy little sayings that get used in or everyday use, part of common use. That's not the Proverbs that would have been explored in ancient times. And every culture in ancient times that we're aware of, whether African, whether Middle Eastern, whether Asian, even in places that would have been like kind of like the Germanic, like they didn't have writing, so everything was oral. Every context had Proverbs, and so these are deeper historical meanings. And it is cool to kind of note that the book of Proverbs was one of the first collected, which is super cool to see that from antiquity, like we see the Bible collecting one of the first one. It wasn't the only one. In fact, we see kind of like this emerged in ancient Egypt around the same time, maybe a little before, maybe a little after, like the same theme of collecting proverbs like this. Now, Solomon could have gotten that from his exposure to Egyptian people and society, or they could have gotten it going to him. We're not really sure. I think most modern scholars tend to believe that he picked up a little more of collecting these from the Egyptians. But it's just something that wasn't just like kind of collected. Oh, I said something smart, write it down.
Yeah.
Not like where fine as frog hair has been used in the South forever and ever, and nobody can really tell you
I'm
where
sorry,
it's
what
from.
did you just say?
Fine as frog hair.
Fine
Have
as
you ever
frog
heard this?
hair.
Fine as frog hair?
So
Oh,
I
yeah.
heard it, but I didn't
Yeah.
comprehend it,
That's
and
a
I just
southern-
moved on.
Yeah, they're little sayings that just
Saying.
kind of get passed along, and I think
What?
like Abraham Lincoln got I think it's been attributed to him of saying never switch your horse in the middle of a river. More than likely,
Do I
that
live in
was-
this country? What are these words? What are
You've
these
never heard
sayings?
this?
This is
No.
from
No,
the,
I haven't
this
either,
is from the
Caroline.
study
Yeah,
of
thank you.
folklore.
You're welcome.
This is from the study of folklore.
Taylor
but
Swift's album.
That's a good album.
That's a great album. Anyway,
That's what you're
I'm
like
sorry.
I was saying. Just kidding. Oh, like I was saying. So folklore for us would have been like passing on little, like, I guess they're euphemisms. It's not quite the same thing. It's not like I said something really kind of smart, write it down. This was an intentional collection of wise sayings. And you see, and cultures would adapt ones that they heard from another culture to their culture. So that's why you'll hear the same theme reiterated in different societies, different cultures. And we also understand, even from 1 Kings, we know that Solomon wrote way more than the Proverbs that were collected of his. And so it's just good to note that these are the ones that were collected and passed down through the ages. He had more, but these are the ones that are in there.
It's good.
It's cool.
And Pastor Jason, you've probably read this before, but this Proverbs was used in the Jewish culture for like a teenage-ish boy. It's the way that they taught leadership to that group. It was something that that was kind of their leadership Bible, for lack of a better term, that they would use with that age group, which I think is good, because when you think about Proverbs structurally, it's a lot of wisdom and a lot of, hey, if you do this, then this works out, and how to have success in life and success in business and success in relationships. But it kind of flows from pursuing a life of virtue and living a life in fear of the Lord. So what's beautiful about Proverbs, and Pastor Jason separates it from some of the like other proverbs that are just wise sayings, is what it flows from. It's kind of what we were talking about with Kings earlier, that like it's difficult to correct behavior when you don't have the source that's in line. And so really the source is the pursuer of virtue and the fear of the Lord.
Well, I liked what Pastor Jeff said yesterday about, a lot of people don't really know where to start reading their Bible or what to do or any of that. And he's like, there's 30 or 31 days in the month. There's 31 Proverbs. Like, just read a proverb a day.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many things in there that are applicable, to all of our lives all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
it makes sense too. Like, if you want to get wisdom, get wisdom.
Yeah.
And this is where you go to get wisdom.
There's a book a friend of mine wrote called Think Like Jesus. Dave Willis wrote that, and it's essentially a 31-day devotional that tracks along with each chapter of Proverbs. So we can drop that in the show notes or something. It's just a resource if anybody wants, they can grab.
It's good. Yeah. Do we have little words of wisdom from Proverbs that we want to talk about?
Yeah, did anybody want to share your favorite proverb? Is that where we're going?
Well, I don't know that I would say I have a favorite proverb. I feel like there's different like verses that I enjoy, but even just like for this purpose, I was just started reading in Proverbs 1, and the first 7 verses, I think, it's just talking about and setting up what the purpose and the theme of the whole book is. And it's, just talking about how the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, it's the purpose and the theme is for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight. And it keeps going over a few things. But then verse 7 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Because I think we live in a culture that is maybe leaning a little bit more towards like, well, don't let anybody tell you your truth. Like, your truth is your truth. But no, like God's truth is the truth. And like, that's the truth that we need to be leaning towards and looking at for all instruction and direction. So I think even just the way that it's set up, and I really, not growing up in church, and maybe even growing up in church, people still wrestle with it. But the phrase, the fear of the Lord has always been one that I've kind of had to wrestle with. Not because because I feel like the fear of fear to me looks and sounds very much like one thing, but biblical fear and the fear of the Lord is so different. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that for a second of like what, as far as like the fear of the Lord, what that means to you, and like if there's ever been a way that it's been explained that was just something that like clicked, I guess, for you, because that's something that I've over the years have studied more and more and kind of have my own understanding of like all of that. But I think because like you hear the fear of the Lord, I think it's probably different than what you assume.
For sure.
Yeah. So without knowing, like diving into the weeds of like what biblical, like extracting that, I haven't done that in maybe ever, but I know for me it means two things. The fear of living life without the Lord is part of that, but then also standing under the awesomeness of the Lord. Does that make sense? Like that everything about life really pales in comparison to Him. And so when I live a life that way, it gives me unlimited perspective, that He is, and the Psalms talk about this all throughout them, that He rules and reigns and is mighty over it all. And when I live under that, there is, even Isaiah 6, that he saw the Lord high and lifted up in the temple, and that there was this fear that just overcame him because of that. And so to me, that's how I've always taken that.
Yeah. Well, for me, that was actually one of the things that kind of bled into my wrong viewing of God for so long. Like why I lived a life stressed out and of high anxiety trying to please the Lord. Because I was like, because I was afraid of His retribution, of what it would mean for my family, of what it would mean for like future decisions. Oh Lord, I just ruined my whole life because of this one decision, and it was all based on fear. And when I started really studying for myself, it was one of the things where I started to see like we are limited in English translations, but that was one of the words that was the closest translation to what they could convey through the Hebrew meaning. And then that started to ring, like kind of brought me out of it a little bit, because now you see words like respect, honor, to go to, but there was still so why was fear still like the leading word for the translation, especially with all the exhaustive resources that go into modern translations? And it was because that there is supposed to be like a holy fear and a holy reverence that we can't really quite convey, but it's not one based on being just like humanly afraid of the Lord.
I know I had a really healthy, great relationship with my dad. Like it was awesome. He was amazing. And there was something about my dad's presence that always brought a lot of things all at the same time, right? And it brought whatever in the moment I needed. Comfort, peace. I remember, I'd mess up in sports and I could look at him and I never felt like, even though he was tough, I never felt like there was judgment. I mean, it was encouragement. There was safety. It's probably the word. But there were seasons where what I needed from his presence was, I better stay in line. Like I knew what was going to happen, right, if I didn't. And it wasn't that he was overbearing. His presence never changed. What I needed in his presence did.
That's good, yeah.
And that, when I think about the fear of the Lord, that kind of back and forth is almost some of the way that I think about it.
Yeah. I think for me, it's respecting kind of what you were saying, even the sovereignty of the Lord. And so, I mean, I wrestled with that too. I am a perfectionist and I'm a people pleaser, but I'm learning that that's kind of wrapped up in pride. And so having to face the sovereignty of the Lord and recognize like my own humanity and being humbled in that, that's a part of it. But the other half of that is that despite my humanity, despite how sovereign the Lord is, he still chooses us and he still chooses me to carry out his purpose. So I think it's all kind of wrapped up in
good.
that.
It's good. It's kind of like, Michael Scott says, would I rather be feared or loved? I want people to fear how much they love me.
Thank you for quoting Michael Gary Scott on today's podcast.
Scott. Oh my golly, bring out his government name. I love it.
That's fantastic.
Incredible.
So I'll give a proverb just of mine that I kind of,
Yeah.
Again, I'm sort of with you, Caroline. Like, there's not just one, there's so many, but it depends on what I'm reading that day. Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times and a brother is born for adversity. I think probably over the last several months, that's been something that's just been a little more top of mind for me. I think, we all need different groups of people in our life. You need a crowd, some people that are cheering you on. You need a circle, some people that are a little closer that can help walk through some situations. And then you need people who are in your corner and who they're willing to fight with you and for you. And to me, when I look at that verse, I sort of see all that, right? That they're friends, that they love you, they're cheering you on. But then there are those brothers that are born for the moments where they need to tell you the things that you don't want to hear, or they're willing to fight with you shoulder to shoulder. And so I love that verse. I think it just puts, it gives a healthy perspective. I think of my two girls and trying to help coach them in the right kind of relationship building. I got to make sure they have those two kinds of people. If not, it's just going to be tough. Yeah. It's going to be tough to succeed in life, right?
For sure. Yeah. My personal favorite is Proverbs 31. So if you're a woman, I'm sure that this is close to your heart and you've heard it a lot. But for me personally, I love the layer, especially considering all that I know about Solomon now on the back end of studying him through Binge the Bible. But there's a few different schools of thought as to like who wrote it, the tone, the voice, all of that, right? So it's kind of thought that potentially this is Bathsheba's words to Solomon after witnessing his abundant marriages. So that kind of puts this into perspective for me too, of she's like, please listen to my words. Please listen to what a truly noble wife is. And I think that's really incredible. But I had this thought whenever I was reading it a while back, and we talk a lot about the church being the bride of Christ. So I just felt in that moment, well, yes, of course, like this is a noble wife, but what if we're also to be a Proverbs 31 church? And we are to steward the community well and steward our households well. And I mean, what would that look like to be a Proverbs 31 church? And that's why it's my favorite. Just that added layer to it, I just think is so fun.
Good.
That's good.
I like that.
Well, I mean, like you guys said, I mean, there's not like one proverb that I would say is my favorite. There's so many that are good and apply to my life, and I go back through all the time. The one, if I could pick out one that I'm most thankful for, it would be 18:22. He that finds a wife finds a good thing and receives favor from the Lord. Because this was one of the ones that I read because like I said, I really didn't want to get married. And it's not because I was playing the field and just wanted to date. I didn't. I was playing sports. I was in a band. I had lots of activities. But I read this one day and I was like, okay, Lord. So whenever I meet a girl that I know is like, she puts you first. If I find somebody who is like that, like just really good, that could be a good gift, that could be a wife. Mm-hmm. And it really points, because everything that I have now, like that I do, like has, my wife Stacy has been a huge influence. Like, and so I mean, this is one that I'm most thankful for, because I don't feel like I would have that had I not seen this verse and applied it to our relationship early, even before we ever even started dating. We were just really good friends, and that verse spoke to us.
I love that. That's awesome. So, Stacy, if you're listening to this, read Song of Solomon, chapter 3, 4, and 5. Pastor Jason is on his way home.
That feels like a great place to.
We were such a
I know, such a sweet,
that is
like,
a sweet
wisdom,
note.
purpose-filled
That's a sweet
note.
note. What are you talking about? They're married. Marriage bed is undefiled. Go for it, Pastor Jason. Enjoy life.
Praise the Lord.
I wanna
and
go
everything
home.
He gives us.
Yes.
All right. Well,
He
okay.
gives good gifts to those who follow Him.
Okay.
See
Yeah.
what I'm talking about?
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that feels like a good place to end that.
Close
this
your
podcast.
eyes. We need some boys to men to play us out today.
Yeah. We'll cut to Boys to Men.
Cut to.
Well, we just binged. Man, what do we even binge? What?
Now I'm just
Binged
singing all
The
boys
East Coast
to men.
family.
We binged not one,
Not
not
two.
two, not three, but four books.
That's
of the
right.
Bible.
Last time
go.
we could not, with integrity, say that we binged the
True.
book of First Kings.
Do you
We
think
didn't
we
finish it.
And we're
compensated
still
a
working on
little
First
bit?
Kings.
I think so.
We started a clothing
True, we are
line.
still not done with First Kings, guys.
Started a clothing line. Hashtag that's in the Bible. We started a sticker line.
Hashtag cynical stickers.
Cynical stickers.
Stickers.
What else did we start?
Man,
A
we
music
started a lot
studio,
of
I think.
conversations in
Yeah.
a lot of households.
We started Trouble. That's what we started.
We started
So,
Trouble.
Panic
for some
Among Our
parents of
Kids
teenagers.
ministry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get in trouble when I get home, probably.
Yeah, you
But-
were. I can't wait to
Incredible.
follow up with what that conversation.
Incredible.
All right, guys. Well, it's been fun.
It's been great.
It's been real. Let's
been
do it.
real.
Let's
It's
do it
been
again
fun.
sometime.
All right, Song of Solomon, everybody.
Can we say it's been real fun?
Yeah.
I am not sure.
That's going to do it for today's episode of Bonus Features. If you enjoyed this week's episode, like this video, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel or to the pod on any streaming services. If you have questions about today's content, email podcast@lifepointnow.com. Don't forget to follow us on socials at LifePointNow and have a great week.